The Pencen pilgrimage. In Rementia, to the north of Askaria, in the 3rd year since the ratification of the Great Unification Decree, a council of clerics and paladins of Devara was held in secret to determine the best course of action to take against the increasing pressure from the Askarian crown. The small city of Rementia had been long loyal to the creed of Devara and the old gods. In Rementia, the Great Unification Decree was viewed as nothing more than an attempt to usurp the faith and loyalty of Askaria's subjects. Word has reached Rementia that an envoy of Askarian nobles, accompanied by at least 30 of armored guardsmen, pikemen, and arbalesters, would soon be approaching the small city. The city's holy warriors numbered 29 battle-ready paladins and 33 clerics. The goal of the envoy was known. They would rededicate places of worship in Rementia to the three, relocate images and shrines of Devara to pre-approved locations in the city's periphery, and disarm any paladin of Devara who did not wish to take the oath of the new gods. So the council of clerics and paladins of Devara discussed their options. Kneeling to the Askarian crown was out of the question. Fighting the envoy could doom the city. But Livin to the north had resisted the Askarian Great Unification Decree, so it was decided. Those loyal to Devara, paladins, clerics, and peasants, would embark on a pilgrimage to Livin. The lord of Rementia had already kneeled to the Askarian crown, and his guardmen were loyal to King Jericho IV, descendant of Ericho the Austere as well. The pilgrimage of those loyal to Devara would have to occur in secret. Rementians loyal to Devara spread news of the pilgrimage in secret. One would use his foot to make an arc on the sand. If the other one was loyal, he would likewise make an arc, completing the circle, the sign of the sun, the greatest source of light. And so news of the pilgrimage spread. 3 nights after the council, those loyal to Devara assembled in the night to make pilgrimage to Livin in secret. Among them were 29 paladins, 33 clerics, 716 peasants, and 2 nobles, now stripped of title, former Baron Eroden of Sulen and former Baroness Emilia of Orange. With supplies and stocks for 7 days' journey accounted for, the group vanished into the moonlit night. They had embarked on what would be known as the Pencen pilgrimage. Mina was a Virian paladin in the head of the pack of nearly 800 men, women, and children that would be known as the Pencen pilgrimage. Flanked by the cleric Doramian Tolls, her close friend, she had marched for a night and a half day north through the forest that spanned the unclaimed land between Livin and Rementia. She was hot under the heavy mail and thick surcoat, and the shade didn't seem to do enough to stifle the hot summer sun, but her training had given her the discipline to endure far worse. Doramian Tolls was not hiding his discomfort quite as easily as her. Wiping sweat from his brow, he smiled at Mina. "We'll make camp at sundown, yeah?" he asked. "We'll have to," she replied. "The peasantry are on their last leg, but the more distance we can make, the better." Doramian nodded. The sun would set soon. Mina and Doramian, leading the pack, would have to scout out the perimeter to accommodate a camp of nearly 800 people. Doramian whistled a signal to the paladins further down the line, and they both set off into the woods. The woods between Livin and Rementia were filled with dangerous beasts and marauding tribes, but Mina was far more concerned with Askarian scouts. They had broken no laws by setting out on pilgrimage, but the cruel king Jericho IV, whom they mockingly called Jericho the Envy-ridden, would not think twice of slaughtering the lot of them from spite. Passing around to a rocky ledge, Mina first heard footsteps, then the crisp sound of blade. It was as she feared. Askarian scouts were pursuing them, but how many and to what end? She signaled to Doramian, and both froze in their tracks, and what she spied ahead chilled her to the bone. Beyond the rocky ledge were 4 knights of the Askarian elite combat squadron, the Night Raiders. They each wore a black coat over a heavy plate and wielded a sharpened spada. On each of their backs was a silver shield bearing the crests of the new gods. The 2 stood motionless behind the rocky ledge. Mina's face burned with fury, and Doramian's eyes pleaded her that she would stay still. They were outnumbered and outmatched, but the righteous fire of a paladin is a difficult thing to quench. Mina charged. It was 4 to 2, and Doramian was no match for an armored knight, but Mina had the divine light of Devara at her back. She charged, shield first, into the first Night Raider, sending him stumbling off balance, his blade falling to the side. She put her full weight into driving her spiked mace into the Knight Raider's face. It connected with a thick crunch of metal and bone, lodging itself into the eye slits of the Knight Rider's helmet. Whispering words of faith, Minos failed as a piece of Devara's divine light filled her weapons, until it reached a hot, glowing crescendo, turning the Knight Rider's helmet into a scene of carnage that far too closely resembled a kicked pot of burnt tomato soup. "He died for a false god," she said angrily, unflinchingly. Her composure was more ironclad than the knight whose head she just reduced to red paste. "Doramin, armor!" The cleric spoke words of faith, and Minos' paladin blade began to glow. The first Knight Raider reached her before the other two, but he mistimed his approach. Her glowing spiked mace, blessed with Devara's eternal fury, crashed across his left temple, sending him sprawling into the leaves, a trickle of blood falling from his deeply dented helmet. The next two were more careful, attempting to flank Mina, but it was now an even-matched fight, and Mina had already dispatched two of them. She retreated, deftly raising her shield to deflect blows from the two assailants, waiting for an opening. The blades of the Knight Raiders pounded at her shield, slashing at her surcoat, denting on her mail and blade cuts through her leather, but the protection of Devara held, making scraps and bruises of what would have been deep cuts and broken bones. At last, a Knight Rider overreached, giving her just enough room to maneuver. She slammed her mace, glowing with divine vengeance, down on his outstretched sword arm. He fell back in a shower of sparks, grunting with the blow, then wailing in surprise. His counter was crushed, his vambrace-clad forearm bent the wrong way from his elbow at nearly a right angle. Mina swung her mace backhanded towards the iron helmet of the last Knight Raider standing, but he shifted to bring up his abomination-crested shield, deflecting her blow in a furious shower of sparks, using the momentum to thrust his own blade through her chest. To his astonishment, she stood her ground, and though impaled through the chest, she fought with the rage of 1,000 spurred old gods, hammering at his helmet, then of what was left of his helmet, until the ironclad knight's head was nothing more than a smoking bowl of pulp. The last Knight Rider, elbow crushed to splinters with a ruined blade quarter, charged Mina, spattar in hand. But he had not practiced offhand combat, and his blade pathetically bounced off Mina's left pauldron. Mina swung her mace at the crippled knight as he pitched past her, connecting with the back of his helmet. He fell limply forward, collapsing in the leaves. The light left Mina's mace. She fell to her knee and coughed a fine cloud of blood. "Take the blade," she croaked to Doramin, who had been dumbly watching the skirmish unfold. Speaking words of faith, Doramin braced his foot against Mina's pauldron. A warm light descended upon the two. "No," she wheezed. He pulled with all of his might, and the blade wrested free of her chest. The wound sprayed blood for the barest moment, then it was gone. Mina sucked in air. The Rementoles moved to help the paladin to her feet, but she stood there on her own strength before he knew it, as if a blade had not just pierced her and had been pulled from her lung mere moments ago. "Armor will need repair," she said quietly. "The rest may have been in danger still." Quickly, they moved back toward the main path. If Knight Raiders were in this part of the woods, they were probably in the hunt elsewhere as well. Mina and Doramin returned to the path to find the group in disarray. Men, women, and children were running north, faces masked of fear, with some worried-looking paladins and clerics among them, while other paladins and clerics hurriedly headed towards a crowd that was forming in the south. In the crowd were banners of the new gods. Mina and Doramin ran toward these banners. Their worst fears had been realized. An envoy of Askarian foot soldiers had rounded up dozens of peasants. The periphery of the crowd was littered with the arrow-ridden bodies of those who had fled, and ranks of abalesters kept close watch on any who might have had the same idea. The remaining paladins formed a protective shield around the clerics, separated from the peasantry by rows of foot soldiers threatened by arbalests. From behind the Askarian ranks, a mounted noble approached. "This has gone long enough," he said in common voice full of sneering contempt. The Askarian noble sat straight in his saddle, clad in shimmering gold-trimmed plate, a smirking picture of smugness. "We've come to collect in the name of King Yercho IV, descendant of the true king." An aged cleric emerged from the paladin phalanx. Mina knew the woman simply as Bell. "Collect what?" Bell demanded. The noble cleared his throat. "It has been ordered by King Yercho IV, heir of the Askarian crown, descendant of the true—" Bell cut him off. "Get on with it, boy!" For a moment the noble's face registered shock, but the privileged pomp of an Askarian noble quickly crept back over it. "We require the two nobles among you," he declared, "and your steel." From the crowd, Erodan of Sulin and Emilie of Orange looked up in astonishment. The crown had already stripped them of their titles when they refused to kneel to the new gods. But before they could react, Belle responded. "Out of question," she said. Belle calmly strode toward the mated noble, through the line of confused guards. She was a woman of nearly 80, grey and bowed with age, and the Askarian troops looked to the captain, who in turn looked to the noble. His expression was one of frozen fear. Should he have beheaded her for insubordination? Granny Slayer, they'd call him, cowed by crowns. "All followers of the true goddess are free to follow her," she said. Her eyes rolled back in her head. She continued towards the noble. "All followers!" she started, but in that moment an arbalest arrow streaked through the air, piercing her in the back. Two more followed, striking next to the first. She fell to the ground. "The flame absolves you!" she croaked. In a flash, a brilliant column of light erupted from where she fell, extending endlessly into the clouds, expanding in heat and light and thunderous sounds. Bodies, arbalests, swords, shields, helms, and debris were sent scattering from the blast. Mina lowered her shield. The fire had vanished, and the dust was clearing. The body of Belle lay motionless in the center of the scene, unscathed except for the bolts in her back. A starburst of ash, debris, and charred still bodies, footmen and peasants alike, extended out from where she lay. Mina charged the remaining opposition, flanked by her fellow warriors of Devara. Most of the arbalests had already loosed their bolts in the confusion and were now struggling to reload their weapons. Into a man they were merciless, crushed until the paladins spiked maces. Other paladins and clerics had engaged the remaining Askarian footmen, pitting mace against sword, old gods against new. Mina's mace crashed through helm after helm as the battlefield around her exploded with the clerics' glowing flashes of divine light. The last Askarian fell to a crushing blow from when, a heavily scarred, black-bearded paladin, the others began to survey the scene. Mina gasped. Some of the peasants that had been knocked prone by the blast had begun to stir. Wiping dust and ash from their brows, one by one the peasants began to rise. Devara had shielded her followers from the blinding column of divine vengeance, and the worst any of them suffered were some bruised bottoms and singed beards. But Belle would return to the sea. Her aged body riddled with arrows, she was taken by Devara before anyone could reach her. Perhaps she spent her last of her will saving the pilgrims. They said rites and buried all the bodies, friends and foes alike. Aside from Belle, 4 paladins, 7 clerics, and 24 peasants had been wounded too gravely to heal. Their foes' bodies numbered far more, but the Pencen pilgrimage's numbers of fighters was quickly dwindling, while the Askarian army was virtually limitless. Shaken, but not broken, the pilgrimage resumed. They reached the Askaria-Liven border in 2 more days, where a Liveni scout regiment was able to provide them safe passage to Leven. The Pencen pilgrimage was over, but the war was not. Mina and Doromin, along with every last battle-ready paladin and cleric from the pilgrimage, pledged fealty to the Queen of Leven, taking up the Queen's crest, a tree growing from an earthen vessel.